friends. Welcome to another episode of the Called Women Show. I am your host, Natasha Miller, and I'm so excited to be here with you today. And I have a very special guest here with me. Her name is Destiny Thomas. Destiny, also known as the Prayerpist, where she assists high achievers with discerning the voice of God to heal internally through Holy Spirit led therapy. She is also the founder of the Prayer-pist Circle Mentorship and the Prophetic Reloaded Conference. Destiny, welcome to the Called Women Show.
Thank you for so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I'm so excited to have you here on the show today. Just as we were briefly talking before we hit that record button, I was mentioning to you how I have heard of your ministry. I've heard of your coaching business for a very long time. So I knew that once we had connected and I had connected with Ashley and she had mentioned you, I'm like, oh my gosh, we have to have her on the show. So, Destiny, I just briefly kind of shared a bit about your professional accomplishments and your
Mhm.
purpose, but I would love for you to kind of just share a bit more about you, who you
um,
are.
so I am a wife of 14 years. Woo. I have
Wow.
three children, um, and I am known by social media and most as the prayer-pist, as you said, where I assist high achievers with
Mhm.
like being able to confidently hear the voice of God for themselves. I do that through
Mhm.
my program known as Purpose Filled Prayer, where we rewrite our vision for God's
Mm.
vision. I found just from my personal life that once you realign with God's vision for your life, it's like the floodgates happen, right? It's like, oh, you finally are giving me
Mhm.
your yes to do what I want to do. And so, because I had battled infertility and some things like that, I had a desire for purpose. And now that I am confident in hearing from God, I help other people do the same thing.
Do the same. And I think that is a great place to start, right? Because this is what you do day in and day out. This is what God has called you to do, created you to do. What do you think is the struggle for women to confidently verbalize and really be able to understand and hear God clearly for themselves?
For women, it mostly is a lot of overthinking, right? A lot of
Yeah.
overthinking, being over analytical, trust, the lack of trust, right? In themselves,
Mhm.
in would God say this to me? Um, and then if I be completely honest, just because of the area I work in, a lot of it is parent wounds, right? Like my parent didn't allow me to
Mm.
ask questions, so God wouldn't allow me to ask questions. My parent only, showed up
Mhm.
in the area of giving me gifts, and so I only look for God in the miracles of materialistic things, right? So a lot of times, those three things are usually showing up in some way of why we are not confident in our ability to hear from God.
Hmm. No, those are really great points, Destiny, that I didn't really even think of, right? Because the first one with you mentioning that women can overthink, and my mind immediately went to we can just be extremely overwhelmed and overstimulated with like so many thoughts, so many
Mhm.
responsibilities, so many to-do lists, right?
Yeah.
And then even just secondly of just even being able to be like confident, right? In
Mhm.
understanding how he speaks to us, and then what you just mentioned in regards to parent wounds.
Mhm.
And I would like to even go further, right? Because just even as a black woman, right?
Mhm.
And I'm sure you talk to all different types of women, but just
Mhm.
specifically, I know that there are a lot of women, just even within the Black community, who struggle very deeply with mother wounds, right? To
Mhm.
where that is something that can also prevent them and cause them to not be truly secure in their femininity, in their
Mhm.
womanhood, and in their voice. So would you mind kind of elaborating on that of what you've seen? Have you come across women who are unable to hear the voice of God for themselves confidently because of wounds that they've experienced through their mother? And if so, how do you see that correlation?
So absolutely, I see it all the time. Because God is multifaceted, right? We have the judgment God, right? Who he's judging, he's gonna convict, but we do also have Abba, right? He's nurturing, he's
Mhm.
loving, he's graceful, he's soft. Um, and so a lot of times
Mm.
women who are dealing with that mother wound, they are hard to receive God as Abba. They are hard to receive him as a nurturer, as a
Mm.
lover, as a carer. And if we be honest, if you can't receive God in that capacity, a lot of times you can't receive
Mm.
the favor of God. You know how to work and perform for God, right? You don't know how
Mm.
to just be with God. And so that's where it shows up the most
Mm.
when God is saying, "Hey, I know you're a hard worker. I know you're a high achiever, but I need you to rest." That's where that mother wound starts to come up, where it's like, no, my mom was an independent woman. My
Mm.
mom got it done, no matter what she had to do. And God's like, yeah, but now I'm trying to be your dad, and I want to take the lead, and I want to lead you. I need you to rest. And so it definitely does show up in those type of
Mm.
capacities a lot.
Wow, that is super deep. I mean, as you're talking, that's making me think, how is my view of God, right?
Mm,
Because I think too, just even in our world today, just even as women, women are very tired and very weary, and we
hmm
have felt as though we have to carry the weight of the world on our shoulders. And
hmm
I think because sometimes that happens because we are put into predicaments to where we have to
Figure it out.
operate in that role. We have to be able to be protector for our kids and nurturer for our kids. But I would just be interested to see, how can a woman, if they're listening to you right now and they're like, oh my gosh, that's me. I don't know the Father as Abba. I can't rest. What would you advise them to do to actually get to that place of rest and trust in God as their Father?
So what I would first say is um by asking him, right? God, I listened to this
Yeah.
and that resonated in a different way, right? And so God, I
Mhm.
ask that you reveal yourself to me as Abba. God, show me what it looks like to
Yeah.
rest in you, to be in you. But after you ask that, you have to know he's going to test if that's what you really want, right? And so if you wake up tomorrow and you wake up too late and end up missing work, don't immediately go frantic and get frustrated and overwhelmed, but say, this might be God saying he want me to rest today, right? Because that's how he operates. Sometimes we want God to be this sit down right now, and that's not who he is all the time. Sometimes he's just going to have
Yeah.
occurrences happen that seem to be inconvenience, but they're actually very intentional.
That's so good. And I love how you said that when you ask, God for something, be prepared to be tested in that very thing, right? To where, and
Mhm.
I think too, even as you're talking, it's making me think like having this overall awareness that God is
Mhm.
with you,
Yeah.
having this overall faith and trust that God hears you. Because let's be real. We pray a lot of prayers and we just kind of hoping they reach
Stick
its
somewhere.
destination, and it's just so I'm so stirred right now where I'm like, okay, let's do some more deep dive, because even hearing you share, I can tell there is a well of wisdom and information and experience and also encounter with God that you
Mhm.
have in this field. So we did share in the beginning that you are also known as the prayer-pist, and I would love for you to share with our audience right now, how did the prayer-pist come about? What is the story behind that uh that ministry, that movement, that name?
So the Prayerpist actually came out of one of the darkest times of my life. It came out of infertility. And
Mhm.
I've been in relation with God since I was 8 years old. And you know,
Wow.
I would just pray and he would do it, right? And then I got married. He sent the love of my life, and I got married at 21. And
Mhm.
so, most people's next question is, when you guys gonna start a family? And it was like, oh, that's not our plan. We want to travel, enjoy each other. Um, and so I like to say
Yeah.
this every time I share even a part of my story is, if you don't get anything from what I share, get that your words matter. Because what we used to say is,
Mm.
oh, we're just gonna wait 3 to 3.5 years before we have kids. Oh, we're just gonna wait 3 to 3.5 years. but we got married and we ended up doing what married folks do, and I ended up getting pregnant, but I miscarried. And I was
Mm.
like, "What happened? Like, why did this happen?"
Yeah.
And we ended up, well, that happened. So then I felt like I gotta fix this because my husband married me. We talked about having kids. Like, is something wrong with me? And we tried for a year to get pregnant again, and nothing happened. And so I went to the doctor, and
Mm.
they informed me, or they diagnosed me with polycystic ovarian syndrome, endometriosis, and hostile mucus. And they said, so your likelihood of having children is probably like slim to none. And so it was like my world started shattering because I'm like, this wasn't part of the plan. And so to fast forward, I found myself in
Yeah.
infertility, and I was infertile literally for 3.5 years. So that's literally what I was speaking,
Mm.
right? But now that I want the baby, I'm like, God, why are you not showing up? And
Yeah.
he's like, well, you kind of said you wanted to wait, right? Um, but
Yeah.
during that
Ooh.
journey, God kept saying, Destiny. Well, first I was upset with God, and I didn't want. I was like, I was upset. You don't want to
Yeah.
give me a
That's
baby.
real.
And then,
Mhm.
my husband kept saying, Destiny, you're being a hypocrite. Like, you're saying God did all these amazing things for you, but the minute he doesn't give you what you want, you don't want a relationship with him. And it started bothering me. So I'm like, he
Mm.
got a kind of a point.
Mm.
And so God began to
Yeah.
reveal to me that I was an entitled Christian, that I really was
Mm.
treating him like a genie. Like, if you do this for me, I'll do this for you. And he said, Destiny, you having children is bigger than you. Right now, I need to heal the little version of you before I can give you children. And he said, you're dealing with
Mm.
abandonment, rejection, and loss of identity. And when you allow me to do
Mm.
and deal with that, I will bless your womb. And I didn't know what that meant. I was like, God, because at the time I was like I was taught you didn't really question God. And so I was like, well,
Yeah.
I read in the Bible he's in control of my womb, but how do I not question him? So I tried to get around the system, and I got a journal and a pen, and I created a diary for God. So I just started like being super transparent with God. I was being very naked, just like, this is not fair. You don't love
Yeah.
me. You say you love me. And about 2 months, a month to 2 months into just venting to God every day, I got this unction to write GS. And I was like, okay. But then I just
Mm.
kept writing. And then about 2 weeks into that, I got this unction to go back and read the journal entries. And every time I would get to the GS, I was like, oh, he's responding to me. And I didn't know then, but the GSs actually meant God speaks. It was when he was coming into the conversation.
Mm.
And
Wow.
so once I knew that, I was like, oh my gosh, like, why am I infertile? Like, what's going on? Right. And so I started asking him about that. And that's when he revealed all that to me. And he started taking me through therapy, or what is now known as therapy. But he took me on an inner healing journey, and he started dealing with my mother wound, my father wound, abandonment, rejection, and all of these things. And that is how therapy was birthed for Destiny, not for other people at the time, but
Mm.
that's how it was birthed for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. 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 That is such a beautiful story. And it sounds just like God, right? Even just from the get go, saying that the prayer-pist movement, right, was created from one of the darkest times of your life. And I think, it's just so remarkable to hear just how the Lord speaks to each person and how he gets
Hmm.
what he wants out of each and every one of us, right?
Yeah.
And I love that you have not just limited your story, right, to you. You have
Hmm.
made a decision to use this story and this testimony and what he's shown you to help other women get inner healing. So I would
Mhm.
love for you to just even share, like, as an inner healing specialist, right, an inner healing coach, what is some of your methodology, when it comes to helping women truly get set free from the inner turmoil that they may have been experiencing for the majority of their life?
Mhm. So, I'll just kinda give a breakdown of what a session looks like, because that's kinda what the methodology is.
Yeah, would love
And
that. Yeah.
so in the session, Well, I want to start with this. So, when God gave me prayer, it wasn't called that, right? But when He gave me the process, He kept saying,
Mhm.
Destiny, there's three levels of healing, right? He said, but unfortunately, most of
Mhm.
my people only get to level two. And that's why they find themselves kind of in a
Oh.
cycle. And I'm like, okay, God, what does this mean? And He was like, well, level one is you identify that there was something traumatic that happened. And everybody's definition of something traumatic is different. It could be your parents worked too much. It could
Yeah.
be, you were touched as a child. It could be different. And he says, so level
Yeah.
one is identifying that something traumatic happened and you still having an emotional response to it. You're still angry, crying. He said, but level two is where most people get, and that's where they go to therapy. And therapy is where you learn coping mechanisms. It learns where you know how you can count back to not get angry. You can talk about it. He said, but the thing about that second level is as your life is changing, right? As you get married, now you got to go through it again because there's a different mirror in your face in marriage. When you have children, there's a different mirror you got to confront, right? So as your life is
Yeah.
going on, unless you're continuing this process, you're going to reach these moments where you kind of feel stagnant. He said, but prayer is
Mm.
when you then invite the Holy Spirit in to identify the seed of or the root of a thing, and you allow me to uproot it from the ground and then re-soil it and refertilize it. So now what the enemy brought into your life to hold you back can now produce fruit, i.e., why he told me to now help
Mm.
people do it, right? And so I was like,
Right.
okay, that's good. All right. So what does that mean? And so what we do in a therapy session, and most of them I do on online virtual. I do in person, but I try to like not do in person. But um, but what we do is you come on the session, we open up with prayer, prophetic prayer, of course, where we just allow the Holy Spirit to speak whatever He wants to speak to you, and then we do the venting portion. So I usually instruct them, hey, we're gonna go into the venting portion. I want you to literally talk about anything that comes to your mind while we're in this session. It could be I was driving today and somebody cut
Mm.
me off and I got super angry, but I don't know why. But the Holy Spirit is super intentional about what He has come to your mind while you're here. Now, while you're sharing, I'm going to be taking notes, but I may not necessarily write down what you're saying. I'm writing down what He's saying. So you may say, lately, I've been feeling
Mm.
overwhelmed and like a lot's going on, and I've been reaching out to my best friend, but she's just so busy, she can't take my calls. And God may say, you're trying to reach out to her, but I'm trying to call you into isolation so I can deal with you. Right. And so as
Yeah.
they're talking, I'm
Mm.
writing down what He's saying. And He usually goes back to childhood. He'll say, because of your parents, not allowing you to make a mess. Now you live within a box, right? He'll just kind of be talking. And so I'm just writing down everything I hear him saying. And then they'll say they're done. And I'll say, okay, now I'm going to share what he gave. And we're going to kind of talk through that. And so I begin to share what he gave. And they're like, oh my God, oh my gosh. Now I do tell them that everything I'm probably going to share with you, you've heard in some capacity at some point. You just didn't know what to do with it. So we're gonna go through it so you
Yeah.
can be confirmed that you heard him right. But then towards the end, we're gonna do a journaling or prayer. We're gonna do a journaling prompt together where you will now have actionable steps of what to do with it, right? And so we kind of do the talking part and then we go into the journaling part. And the journaling part is where they get to vent to God. They kind of share with Him what came up while we were talking. Because as we're talking, He will bring back child memories that resonate with where these things kind of pinpointed and started. And so they do their
Yeah.
venting portion, and then He will give me questions for them to pose to Him. So as you're in the
Mm.
session, one question may be like if somebody that comes on struggles with the need of control, a question he may have me
Mm.
pose them is, God, where did this start from? Why do I need control?
Mm.
Right? And so they will ask him the question, and especially my overthinkers, they get in their head and I'm like, just write whatever you hear. Right? And we'll decipher
Yeah.
who's speaking later, but just write what you hear.
Mhm.
And so then, as they're doing their journaling, I'm also journaling for them. And so I'm writing
Mm.
what I hear him saying to them, but for them. And so then when they're
Mm.
done, I have them read what they got first. So they read everything they got, and then I say, okay, I'm gonna read what I got, and we're gonna see if there's any similarities.
Mm.
And there's all he's something he put in their letter, he put in my letter to them. So they're like, oh my gosh, like literally
Wow.
he'll call them like a
Oh,
nickname that I don't
forever.
know they had, or things like that. And so it begins to do a couple things. It reminds them that God, in fact, does know who I am. He knows where I am. So I don't have a lot of work to do. I just need to give him more control, right? But it also gives them
Mhm.
actionable steps. He'll say something like, I've been calling you to seek me daily by being in your word, but you're running from me. So get back in your word, right? So he'll
Mm.
give them instructions in that regard. But yeah, that is literally how the sessions go. Um, and that is usually the starting process.
Yeah. No, I mean, that is a very powerful process. And I definitely want to be able to give our audience the opportunity to even just, possibly book a session with you, or if they're listening and they're like, oh my gosh, this is like what I need. Because one thing that really stood out to me that I've been kind of mulling over, I would say, probably in the last year, because I have been a beneficiary of, just the gift, and the
Mhm.
blessing that can come from having a healthy therapist, right? There
Mhm.
were just seasons, there are seasons in my life. I mean, my husband and I, like, we've been running a business together, we've done
Mhm.
ministry together, raising kids, like just the ins and outs, to where there came a time in my life where I was like, no, I can't just go to therapy here and there randomly. Like, it has to be a part of my lifestyle, because
Yeah.
I need, a safe space to process where someone is not
Mhm.
attached to my world.
Yeah.
But then, just even just like in the last year, I've just been realizing, for me personally, is like, because I went through a few therapists with, like, with moving here to Texas, and I realized too, of like, okay, why am I going, to therapy? Because I found that I
Mhm.
would I would go to sessions, and it would be more of a venting. Like, it is me
Mhm.
more sharing things, but that person really wasn't helping me to overcome it. It was more like
Mhm.
they were there to listen and affirm it. And that's
Mhm.
when I realized, okay, in this season, I don't think it's necessarily I need a therapist, but I need a coach. I need someone
Mhm.
that's going to be able to help me put into movement what I've learned. And I think too, Destiny, like, I've seen, and I've just been moved as well, as like, this might sound a little bit weird, but I watched like some panels, and like some, Christian centered panels, to where it's very much like when somebody says, I go to therapy, like everybody claps, and
Mhm.
I'm like, okay, that's great. But I'm like, should you be in therapy for the rest of your life? Like,
Your
I feel
life.
like there should be a place. And again, some people do have complex trauma to where it can
Mhm.
take 20 to 30 years. But I do think that it is imperative as believers, right,
Mhm.
to come to a place of understanding uh the position and the role of having therapy, but also not keeping the Lord out of it, right? Because at the end of the
Mhm.
day, you can have a spirit-filled therapist,
Mhm.
clinical, psychologist help you, but after that session's over, you can put into practice the tools, but you still have to, your soul has to change, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's something that has to become a part of you. So I just love how the Lord showed you that three-step process, because I could relate. A lot of us are stuck in therapy, and we feel like therapy's a badge. Like, okay, we're
Mhm.
good because we go to
Yeah.
therapy. But I'm like,
Mhm.
are we still submitting the, like, are we uprooting it, like you said,
Yeah.
to that,
Yeah.
to where we can slowly kind of get off of the therapy train and come to a place to where you can stand confidently in what you've invested into therapy, and also what you're investing and walking in as a child of God.
God.
So I'd
Yeah.
love to know your thoughts on that. So I thought it was really interesting you even mentioning that, because that's something that I've been processing just personally for me, of
Mhm.
like, where am I with this,
Yeah.
personally in my journey, and where God has me.
I love that you touched on that because I like to be clear, I'm not a licensed therapist, right? And
Of course. Yeah,
I
yeah.
I I I find myself in that tough spot sometimes because people either think one of two things. They immediately think I'm against therapy, and I actually am not. I've been to therapy. I
Oh,
if I
yeah.
feel like I need it, I don't mind going back to therapy. Um,
Of course.
I just know that the way society is now, that is the badge of honor or the final thing. but enough people are not being honest with, I actually am going here and I feel re-triggered more than I feel like I'm getting help. Most people are not being honest and
Yeah, that's so
saying,
true. Yeah, I'd be like, oh my gosh. And I even had to realize like this isn't good for me because I'm rehearsing pain and then they're diagnosing the pain and then I'm like ruminating on the pain and then I'm feeling like I'm stuck.
yeah, yeah.
So I
And I'm
don't know
like,
if that's maybe a bad therapist, but I don't know.
I won't say a bad therapist. I think the reality is there are some places to heal. There are some places we have to go, right? But if you're not careful and if you're not given the tools necessary to say, hey, this did happen, what you felt was
Yeah.
what you were feeling, but how do you walk out of it or give actionable steps, then you're kind of putting you're opening a wound and you're telling me, hey, let it heal, but you're not giving me the antiseptic, you're not giving me the band-aid, you're not giving me anything for it, right?
Yeah, that's
And
it.
so
Mhm.
like I said, I do believe that therapy is necessary. But like you said, if you don't have
Yes.
any checkpoint to say, hey, I've been coming here for a year and I kind of don't see any difference. The reality is, I personally feel that you need therapy and therapy. I feel like therapy isn't, I don't want to say it's not something you need as often as you may need therapy, because therapy, now I will say this, people who I even work with therapists and they'll come and they're like, Destiny, the stuff God brings up in that 1 hour of a session, it literally took me 2 years in therapy to get here, right? So a lot comes up, but I
Mhm.
think we don't spend enough time mauling on what's coming up. It's kind of like when we go to conferences, you get all these notes, but you're not doing anything with it. You're just going back to the next session and the
Mhm.
next session and the next session. I think it's okay to say, hey, I don't necessarily need to start or go to therapy every week. I may need to go once a month to kind of allow this stuff to come up, process what's happening, right? Or maybe every 2 weeks, right?
Mhm.
But in regards to what you said about like being on stage, getting the clap, one thing God said to me, He said, Destiny, I'm disheartened because my people, my children specifically, have made it appear as if I will allow their healing to be in the hands of a human being.
Mm.
And I wouldn't.
Wow.
You need
Wow.
me because one thing that I was in prayer with God, and God said,
Mhm.
Destiny, you never asked me where the seed of abandonment came from. And I was like, that's a question I'm supposed to ask? I didn't know, right? I was like, but hey, since we're here, let me ask you, right? And so I was like, okay, God, where did the seed of abandonment and rejection come, or abandonment? I don't want to say rejection. Where did the seed of abandonment come from? And
Mhm.
He said, Destiny, it came from the womb. When your mother was pregnant with you and
Mm.
told your biological father she was pregnant with you, and they were in high school, and he said, well, I got a scholarship, my parents are pastors, you got to figure that out on your
Yeah.
own. That seed was planted right there. There's no therapist in the world that can tell you that.
Yeah.
So you're
Yeah.
basically,
Unless yeah.
God likes to heal us from the bottom up. When we're going to therapy, a lot of times we're dealing with that
Mhm.
last breakup, that last divorce, that so you're healing in a way that is not really getting to the root of a thing. You're dealing with it in the moment. And yeah, they take you back to some things, but you're not getting to the actual seed of it. And so that's why you
Yeah.
need to invite me into it, because as I'm pulling at the seed and pulling it up, now you can work with your therapist to kind of
Mhm.
talk through it. But if you're kind of, what he
Yeah.
said is you're cutting on leaves and branches, but expecting the tree to disappear. It's still gonna be there.
Hmm. That's really good. And the word that came to me when you were speaking was congruency or the word congruent. Like how you
Mhm.
were talking about the process of healing, right? Because like you mentioned, it's asking God, okay, do I need to go to therapy like once a month or twice a
Mhm.
month? Because the thing
Mhm.
is like you can have a session which is powerful and impactful, but also you have to take into consideration the other days, right? Like there's other
Mhm.
days to where if you have your therapist on speed dial and you can't get through a day without calling the therapist, then that's kind of like no, like you want to be able to get through the day whether or not someone is with you or someone is
Mhm.
not with you. I think it's just like what the Lord was sharing with you because just even for us with our coaching program, we have like a lot of different women who are in our programs, right? We have some women who are are a clinical therapists, social
Mhm.
workers. They've been practicing therapy for years, and a lot of them just recently um had mentioned that after they got their coaching certification, that they were like, "Hey, I want to leave this field and be able to
Mhm.
go into coaching because it gives me more flexibility to be able
Ability.
to really
Mhm.
help women." So to me, I'm like, wow. And I do think, and this may just even be prophetically, that again, what you're saying is in the vein of what is needed today, right? At the end of the
Mhm.
day, like, every field is needed. In no way are we bashing the
Yeah.
therapeutic field, because we know that it's necessary. But I do think that society has, in a way, idolized it to the point to where we feel that we're not healed completely until we've had X amount of sessions, or
Mhm.
we're paying this amount for that, or because I think from the session that I was listening to with that panel, when this young man talked about it, it very much came across as, I'm I- hey, I've been in therapy for this long, I'm not ready to do X, Y, and Z, I'm still here. So I'm like, okay, I get that. But I think healing God's way, it protects you, but it also
Mhm.
doesn't, like, delay you. Like, it
Yeah.
doesn't delay you to where you're
Yeah.
not able to function, you're not able to still grow. That's the
Mhm.
supernatural power of God, that he can simultaneously do multiple things
At
at
one
one
time.
time,
Yep.
right?
Mhm.
So, yeah, I mean, girl, you have me over here just thinking. I mean, I feel like I'm in a I'm in a therapy session. I'm like, but I feel like whenever I get around spirit filled, like prophetic women like that, that are just so pure hearted and, like, love what they do, I just feel this connection of, like, oh my gosh, we're in the same vein. And what you're doing is just so necessary and needed for this time, to really pull women
Amen.
out of these dark places, to help them to confidently walk in their call and hearing God's voice. So I'd love for you to just even mention that, I'm sorry, not mention, but talk about um your a mentorship program, and then you also host a prophetic conference. So just from our conversation here today, I'm sure women are able to hear and see that, yeah, God speaks to you, you have a relationship with the Lord. So just talk about your mentorship, and then lastly your conference, and how women can stay connected to you.
Absolutely. So my mentorship is we call it PFP, or prophetic reloading. I mean prophetic. I mean purpose filled prayer. Sorry, accelerator. It's an 8-week course, and so I bring in the ladies and we rewrite our vision for God's vision. So we do prayer P. Because as you're realigning with God's vision, you got to do some of that grunt work, that dirt work that makes you feel like you're not enough, or
Mhm.
that you can't have everything He has for you. So we do a project where we do a rewrite our vision for God's vision project. And then we also host a retreat. So we do a stateside retreat and an international retreat every year. So we're actually about to go to Africa. I'm super, super excited about that. And so that's what we
Wow.
do in the program. And like I said, we work together. They do therapy. We do a vision board project. We do accountability. So as God is giving you these things to do, we're holding you accountable to say, "Hey, he told you to do that on Tuesday. We're on Thursday. Where you at?" Right? Because you need that. You
Yeah.
need that community. You need people who are just as wild as you are. Right? When it comes to, like, I heard God say this.
Right.
Do I do it now? So that's my accelerator, and we actually start the next cohort on August the 15th for that. And then my
Okay.
conference is called Prophetic Reloaded Conference. We actually just came out of that. We had that July 18th and 19th. And
Oh,
what
wow.
that is, this is a conference I host here in Virginia Beach, where I am, where we come together to get insight from God about what's to come. And so this year's theme, so every year the theme is
Mhm.
different. This year's theme was Joseph's Arise. And he actually had us come
Mm.
together. We hosted workshops on gardening, finances, family,
Wow.
intercession, health, just all the areas that God is telling his children to get come to him about and get in line with, so that you
Yeah.
are prepared for what's to come. So yeah, that's who
Mm.
I am. You can find
I
me
love
on
that.
any social media platform under the Prayerpist or Realizing Destiny because my business or company is Realizing Destiny. But if you search me anywhere, that I'll come up.
No, I love it. And you know what? I am like, I have to have you come back because I know that I had briefly mentioned that we need to talk about friendship, but we're kind of running out of
Hmm.
time with the recording set. But I definitely would love to have you come back because I'm thinking about doing a series on
Hmm.
friendships, on female friendships. I feel like this is something that a lot of women struggle with, that I've struggled with in past seasons. So would love to have you come back so that we can just do a deeper dive in that. But Destiny, this has been such a fruitful conversation. It's definitely got me excited about just what God's doing in women, how God is using you. I'm excited for the women to hear this episode. Ladies, I want you guys to let us know in the comments what stood out to you in this conversation. There were so many uh wisdom bombs that were dropped and just so many eye-opening, life enriching uh life enriching conversations that took place. So let us know in the comments what ministered to you. And then also make sure to check out Destiny on all of her social media platforms. I believe that if you go onto her website or onto her Instagram, she also has some 15-minute consultations that you can sign up for.
Hmm.
You already got to even just quickly walk through her method of how she walks her clients through whenever they're in a session with her. So make sure to support her and celebrate what God's doing in her life. So thank you guys for tuning in to today's episode. Make sure to subscribe, share. I absolutely love being able to bring you guys just these amazing conversations, and I hope you love them just as much as I do. So again, thank you guys so much, and I'll see you in the next episode.